Houston. Houston, we have a problem. DJ Apollo has landed. I repeat, DJ Apollo has landed.
And you are listening to the Tales of Music and Film podcast. My name is Christian Taylor, and thank you for clicking on today's episode. I hope you enjoy this one, and I hope you get some joy out of it, and I hope I help brighten your day a little bit. Hope you're having a very excellent day, and I hope that everything is going your way, and I hope you are living your life to the fullest. And we got a good one in store for today, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about a movie that I've been very eager to discuss for about 6 or 7 months now. But before we get to it, it was very important to me that I give a little shout out to all my listeners who have been supporting my podcast since it started. So for anyone who doesn't know, so on the on Spotify Anchor, when I upload episodes, it shows me all the data on who's been listening to my podcast, you know, like how many episodes have been played, which episode's the most famous one, and one of the coolest things on here, it shows you all the different countries around the world of people who have listened to your show. So I wanted to give a shout out to all my listeners right quick. So, of course, I gotta give a shout out to all my friends here in the United States. And I want to give a shout out to my listeners in Canada, United Kingdom, Spain, Greece, Denmark, South Africa, Mexico, India, Finland, Brazil, and Egypt. Now, I don't know how many of you in those other countries have listened to my show, but if there is just one person in each country who really gets some joy out of listening to my show, then I've done my job. And it means the absolute world to me that you guys take time out of your day to listen to my episodes, so I owe you the biggest gratitude, and I really hope you enjoy the show. This is a project I never thought I would do in my lifetime, and getting to do podcast recordings, it means a lot to me. So again, thank you for being an amazing supporter and being a fellow friend. So, the movie we're going to be discussing today, I'm very excited for this one. We're going to be covering Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the very surprising 5th installment that I was really not expecting. I really thought that Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was going to be the last one. And so, the main plot for this movie, we'll get to that here in a minute, but first I'll start off by reading some of the main cast members. So, first off, we have Harrison Ford, of course. Then we have some new actors. You have Mads Mikkelsen, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Toby Jones, Boyd Holbrook, Karen Allen, and John Rhys Davis, who of course plays Sala. This is his third time playing the character, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, Karen Allen returning yet again to play Marion Ravenwood, who in my opinion is the best girl of this franchise. She was Indy's true love, and I knew that since the first movie. I mean, it's no comparison, you know, you have Marion Ravenwood, Willie Scott, and Elsa, and we all know, like, you know, we all know how those went. You know, like, Willie I just found to be super annoying in Temple of Doom, and Elsa was a Nazi, and a big traitor, so I don't think I need to say anything else about her. I guess she just couldn't let it go. But anyway, now would be a good time to give a little plot summary about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny right quick. So I'm going to try my best not to spoil too much. I highly recommend you go check this movie out. So Daredevil archaeologist Indiana Jones races against time to retrieve a legendary dial that can change the course of history. Accompanied by his goddaughter, he soon finds himself squaring off against the villain, whose name I'm not sure how to pronounce. His last name is Voller. He is a former Nazi who works for NASA. So that's the little plot summary there for you. And the man who directed this movie was none other than director James Mangold. And some of his other movies you may know is, of course, Logan, the ninth installment. It was the ninth time that Hugh Jackman played Wolverine, which we all thought was going to be the last one, but now he's returning for Deadpool 3, and I cannot express how excited I am for that movie. James has also directed Ford vs. Ferrari, another movie I've been really needing to check out. I Walk the Line, which is the Johnny Cash biopic from 2005. And Night and Day, a comedy starring Tom Cruise. So, I think he was a very good choice to direct this movie. I mean, of course, part of me wishes that Steven Spielberg had directed this because he directed the previous 4 films, but I think he was working on another movie at the time, so I don't think he had time to direct this one as well. But I think the movie was in really good hands. I mean, I think overall, I think James Mangold did a really good job. So the very first trailer for this movie dropped on December 1st, 2022. I was halfway through almost of my senior year in college when the first trailer dropped. And I gotta say, it really won me over. It really got me emotional. I thought the trailer did a really good job of showing what this film had to offer. And I also saw on the internet some early set photos that showed Harrison Ford filming the train sequence for the beginning of the movie, which I will talk about later. And the photos gave me some hope because, going into this, I wasn't sure what to think. Because for the longest time, I was thinking, was this 5th installment really necessary? Because, as all you know, so I covered Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull on my podcast. It was my 3rd episode, and it is, as of right now, it's my most famous episode with 85 plays. And I really think that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was the perfect ending to Indy's story. And I was really worried that they were going to ruin that ending, and they kind of did a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. And I'll get more into that here in a minute. But I was really won over when the second trailer dropped, which was the 30-second Super Bowl commercial. I really enjoyed that one. And that one kind of gave me some more hope. And then there was a third final trailer, which by the time that one came out, it's like, okay, I'm going to give this movie a chance. It looks good. I mean, I'll never turn down an opportunity to see my childhood hero on the big screen. So before we go any further, I was wanting to take a minute and talk about my history with Indiana Jones. Now, for anyone who knows me very well will know that Indiana Jones is my favorite film character of all time. The Indiana Jones movies are my childhood. I've watched those films religiously my whole life. I've been dressing up as Indy since I was 7 years old. I'm even going to put in my will that I am to be buried in my Indiana Jones costume when I pass away. I refuse to be buried in a very boring, dumb-looking suit. I want to be dressed up in my Indiana Jones costume. I'm putting that in my will someday. And I love wearing the costume. I still have it right now. I dress up in it whenever I get the chance. Anytime I go to Comic-Cons, it's one of the first outfits I'll think of wearing. I love wearing the Indiana Jones costume. Heck, I wore the costume so much growing up that literally some of my classmates and some people around in my hometown nicknamed me Indy. And I wore that like a badge of honor my whole childhood. That was such a cool thing to have people call me that. And I've studied these films in and out, and they are, in my opinion, some of the greatest action and adventure films ever made, and I will die on that statement. And so the next talking point that I'd like to discuss for a minute is that obviously I knew that this film was going to receive a lot of negative feedback. I'll admit, even I was kind of on the fence a little bit about whether or not we needed a 5th film because, Harrison Ford, when this movie was announced, Harrison Ford was, 79, 78 years old. I'm just like, is he still going to be able to pull this off? I mean, the guy was 65 when they filmed Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and he did stunts and he did his fight scenes still and everything, but I just don't see him being able to do that in this, and he pulled it off. Like, the man is a machine. Like, he really pushed himself through this one. Like, he made sure to give it his all with this performance. So, I mean, he genuinely surprised me. I really thought the old age was going to stop him a little bit, but it didn't really. And, of course, there were all kinds of articles being made about how bad the film looks and everything. Everybody just trashing on it. And that didn't sit right with me, because my rule is, how about you wait and see it in theaters before you start hating on something? Because in today's world, it's like everybody wants a movie to fail. Like, people are way too judgy towards films, and I just think the problem is that we are setting our expectations way too high. I always keep my expectations at a minimum, or I keep them at a low standard. That way I'll enjoy any movie, or I'll at least try to enjoy them, because I don't like hating on films. You know, I don't like doing that. And there's only like a handful of films that I generally dislike, but I mean, I still respect what they were trying to do. I just don't think it didn't work, in my opinion. But if there's others who like films that I don't like, I mean, that's fine. That's the point, you know. We all have our tastes in movies we like and dislike. We're all human beings. We're going to have different opinions. And part of the reason there was so much hate going on, and I can understand where people were coming from, is that people were worried that this movie was going to get the social justice warrior. You know, it was going to be people were worried this movie was going to become a victim of the SJW, you know, woke stuff. You know, people thought this film was going to fall victim to that. But there was a lot of theories going around that Phoebe Waller's character, Helena Shaw, was going to take over the franchise from Indy. And I can understand, I wouldn't like that either. And when to back up this claim that people were making, apparently during the test screenings of the movie, apparently there's a lot of articles coming out saying that the test screenings didn't go very well. And I do have a theory that they went back and changed the ending, because I heard a lot of claims that apparently the original ending was that Indy dies and that Helena was going to take over as the new lead, and I don't think that went well, and I think they went back and reshot the ending. Like, they say they didn't do any reshoots, but I am fully convinced that they went back and changed the ending, and I'm very happy that they did, because if they had went that route, this film would have been ruined, in my opinion. Like, you don't make the main character, you know, of his franchise a side character. Like, that's not how it works, you know? Like, my whole thing is just kind of like, if you want to do, you know, female-led franchises, then think of something new, you know? Like, I see Hollywood, it seems what they're trying to do is they keep taking these classic franchises and trying to reboot them with, you know, with female leads and all that, and I just don't think that works, you know? I think if you want to do a female-led film, then come up with your own story, and don't ruin franchises that people love, you know? Like, now, I'm not saying that, you know, female leads would ruin these franchises, but they started off, you know, with male leads. You can't just be like, well, we're going to end this story like you don't get to see them anymore. It's all brand new female characters. I just don't think that works well. I think that's a big, you know, middle finger to all the fans of these franchises. Like, I love female characters. Like, I could name you 30-something or more, you know, female leads that are just incredible characters on screen. But like I said, I just think it's important that, again, if you want to do your own female story, then go ahead and do it. But I think you should think of your own brand new story to tell with this female character. Now, thankfully, this film, in my opinion, didn't seem to have fallen victim to all the woke stuff going on. Helena was quite annoying during a good portion of the movie, and I will get to that later. But the next thing that just really blew my mind about this movie, this next talking point that I want to talk about here, is the budget. Now, I just cannot believe the budget for this movie. It was over $300 million. And I was just thinking, like, there is no reason why this film had a budget that high. Like, that is just ridiculous. Like, so many Disney films are coming out now with just these insane budgets that I'm just thinking, like, how are you expecting to make your money back? Like, so many movies they do now have to rank up a good amount of money just to break even. It's like the people who work there think the higher the budget, the better. And I'm just thinking, like, no, it's the other way around. The lower your budget is, the more income you'll make. And I actually went back and looked at some of the films that Disney released last year, and I just wanted to use them as examples. So the first film I want to talk about, Wish, a animated film that came out that bombed at the box office, and this movie had a budget of $200 million. And then another film that bombed big time was the Marvels. I didn't go to see it in theaters because I'm just kind of fed up with Marvel at this point, but I could talk about that till the cows come home, but that's going off topic, so I'm just going to stay on topic. But yeah, I'm done with Marvel movies. And the Marvels had a $274 million budget. And then Haunted Mansion had a budget of $150 million. Now, these budgets, like when you're hitting a $200 million budget, I'm just thinking, like, that just seems a little ridiculous and way too high. And I mean, it can work if you use it correctly, but these are just like superhero stories. Like, I don't understand, why does the box office need to be that high? Like, I don't understand that. And I wanted to do a little comparison for you. So think about this. Here's some observation here. So each of the Lord of the Rings films. So, Lord of the Rings, one of the most famous trilogies ever made, and they're some of the most legendary films to come out in the 21st century. I've actually been thinking about going back and rewatching the extended cuts because I haven't seen them in forever, and give them another chance. But anyway, each Lord of the Rings film had a budget of only $93 million. And the first movie alone, Fellowship of the Ring, grossed $898.2 million. Now that is a box office smash hit right there. Like, that just blew my mind. Like, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny had double the budget of a Lord of the Rings movie. I just could not believe that. Like, this movie had to do a lot of work just to break even, like I said earlier, which is what happened. The movie had a box office of $384 million at the overall box office, and it just broke even. There wasn't really no money was really made from it overall. And the other thing I wanted to use as an example here is that Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, its budget was only $185 million, and the movie went on to make over $700 million. Like, when it comes to, like, action movies, I don't think your budget should go past, like, $100 million, like, at least, And the next thing I wanted to talk about is that you don't need a high budget to make a good movie. Like, my top two, my top two examples I always tell people about low budget filmmaking is like the original Evil Dead or the original Halloween. Like, both those movies had budgets of like $400,000, $500,000, and both movies went on to make millions at the box office. And I found some new examples that I want to talk about for a second. So we all know the classic late 90s hit, The Blair Witch Project, a movie that I need to watch. I actually own it on VHS. The Blair Witch Project had a budget of $60,000. That's it. And the movie went on to make $248.6 million. Like, this movie made the box office that the Marvels did, And it only had a budget of $60,000. And here's the one that really surprised me. So we all know the very first Star Wars movie, New Hope, came out in 1977. That movie's box office was only $11 million. And the movie went on to grow $775.8 million. So those movies are prime examples, like I said, that as long as you have a good story first, the money will come in on its own. But it's not about all the effects, all the explosions and stuff. You need to make a good story. Like, a budget is not going to save a bad movie. And Napoleon Dynamite, another example. $400,000 budget, grossed $44.9 million. Just to add one more example, keeping it in threes. But like I said, as long as you have a good story made, you'll get a good amount of money. But like I said, I just think so many films today have way too high a budgets that just can't be made back at the box office. Like, we need to go back to making lower budget filmmaking. I really do believe that we need to go back to keeping the budgets low. But again, that's just my opinion. I'm not a film expert by any means. These recordings are just me talking about my viewpoints on stuff. So now we're going to be covering the actual movies. So I went to go see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny for the very first time with my dad on the weekend it opened here in the United States, and I went with my dad. We went to the same theater, which was the Orpheum Theater in Hillsborough. It was the same theater that we saw Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull at. And I was actually looking through one of my photo albums, and I found a picture of me standing near the theater in my time, like little 8-year-old me wearing my Indiana Jones costume. I remember when we went to the theater, outside the Orpheum Theater, they had this 30s looking military truck, and it was filled up with gold in the very back, and it had C-3PO sitting in the back. And my dad took a picture of me standing next to that truck, and I have it in one of my photo albums. And when we went to the theater to see Dial of Destiny, I stood in the same spot where the truck was 15 years prior, and I had Dad take my picture. And of course, I went dressed up in my costume, like, why wouldn't I? So that was a really cool experience, getting to recapture that, and getting to go to the movies with my dad is always a win. And we had a really great time, and I was actually pretty blown away with what this film had to offer. Like I said, I loved Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Overall, I thought it was a very good movie. It was a very different kind of Indiana Jones, which was not a bad thing by any means. And overall, I think this movie was a good, send-off for Indiana Jones. I mean, I liked the ending. I thought it was alright. I still prefer Kingdom of the Crystal Skull's ending, but Dial of Destiny's ending was pretty good too. And yeah, it was a great memory getting to see my childhood hero on the screen again. So, the next talking points I'd like to get into is that I'd like to talk about what I didn't like about the movie and then what I did like. So we're going to talk about the dislikes first. So one of the main things I did not like about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was that Disney yet again pulls this trope where in sequels, the hero has to lose everything they gained back in their predecessors. So, like, Disney seems to think that when they do sequels, like, they did this to Han Solo in Star Wars The Force Awakens. Like, Han loses everything. So, in between, the 30 years between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, Han and Leia separate. Their son goes evil. He loses the Falcon. He loses his rebel status as a general. His war hero status is taken away. He goes right back to being a smuggler like he was all the way back in Star Wars New Hope. And it makes all that growth that he had in the original trilogy completely pointless. And they did the same thing to Luke in Last Jedi. His Jedi group were all killed. His Jedi camp was destroyed. He leaves. He loses his friendships with Han, Leia, and Chewie. He's all alone. It's like, yeah, the original characters were not treated very well, in my opinion, in the new trilogy that Disney did. And they pulled that same trick again with Indiana Jones. Like, in this movie, so again, we're going to be entering spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, I recommend you pause the recording, go watch the movie, and come back. So, literally, so after the 25-minute train sequence, which I'll talk about later, it cuts to Indy in 1969, and he lives in New York City. And then we find out that his son, Mutt Williams, was killed in Vietnam. And the reason they did this, I had a theory going into this that they were going to kill off Mutt somehow, because the actor Shia LaBeouf, who played Mutt in the last movie, he has expressed a lot that he hated starring in that movie, even though that it helped put him on the map. But that's just my opinion. Like, he hated playing Mutt, and I don't think he had any intention of playing him ever again, so he was never going to be in this movie. So he had to think of some way to explain why isn't he there. And I think they did go the best route that he was killed in Vietnam. I mean, you know, keeping historical accuracy in there. And Indy and Marion separate, which I did not like at all. And he loses his job as a professor. Like, he's not even, like, the one thing I did not like is that why is he living in New York City? Like, why didn't they open up with him teaching at that same school we saw in the previous movies? That just didn't make any sense to me. Like, he's living in this really run-down apartment with barely anything in it. And he's lost his life, his job, his very nice big house that we saw in the previous films, and he's now a drunk. There's many scenes throughout the movie of him drinking. It's just like, did we really need this? Like, Indy's better than this. Like, did we have to make him an old, bitter drunk? Like, was that really necessary? I just don't like how Disney seems that in sequels they have to strip all the stuff that was gained for the character, and then they have to regain it back again. But it's like, we've already seen this. Like, why take everything away if it's just going to get it back again by the end of the movie? Like, I don't get that at all. And again, just Indy and Marion not being together really broke my heart. Like, I knew going in they were going to go this route, and it ruins the fourth film's ending. But the ending of this movie kind of brings it back, and I'll get more into that later when I get to the things I did like about this movie. Now, the next thing, this is a small little thing, but the next thing I didn't like is that they changed the Indiana Jones logo on the movie promotional posters. They took away the original, orange and yellow colored logo that we've seen on the 4 previous films, and they changed it with this new font, and the Indiana Jones text is like sand shaped and colored, and it just looks awful. Like, I actually bought myself a Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny poster where somebody went back and re-edited it and added in the classic logo. They never should have changed that. They should have kept it the way it was. Like, that was just a small little thing that just really, really annoyed me. And here's another thing that really drove me nuts about this movie is that we didn't get any scenes with Indy shooting at the bad guys. So one of the things I loved about the main trilogy was the gun scenes. They felt so cool and action-packed. And in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and in Dial of Destiny, we get no scenes of Indy getting into gunfights with the villains. Like, in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, we get one scene of Harrison pointing his gun at somebody, but he never fires it. Now, I don't think it's a really big deal to see him killing bad guys, but I was really hoping in this one we get to see him in a gunfight. And he does have a shootout in this film towards the very end, but it lasts like 15 seconds, and he doesn't even hit anybody. It's like in this movie they were scared to have Indy kill anybody. Like, he doesn't carry a gun the entire film. Like, he doesn't even wear his gun holster belt in this movie. Like, when the Super Bowl trailer came out, it gave me the impression that we were going to get a scene of Indy shooting at the Nazis on the train during the first 25 minutes, which is a flashback. And we didn't get that. I just wish in both films we could have gotten a scene of Indy getting into a gunfight. I was really sad that, both films we didn't get to see that. Because that was one of my favorite things about the main trilogy that was done so well, were the gunfights parts. And the next thing that I kind of knew they were going to do this is that Sallah and Marion did not have big parts in this movie. I was really hoping that Sallah and Marion would be main characters in this. Unfortunately, they're both side characters. Marion, you don't see her until the very end of the movie. She's in the movie for the last 5 minutes. And now look, I'm happy they brought her back, but I was just really sad and disappointed that she didn't play a bigger role in this. The actress even said she was a little disappointed that she wasn't given more to do in this. You have Marion Ravenwood, one of the greatest female leads in Hollywood film history, right? And you're telling me you couldn't think of anything she could do in this? I just wish she could have been in it just a little more. And same with Sallah. Sallah was the best partner in crime that Indy had the whole franchise. He was that one great best friend that Indy could always count on. And he was in the movie a lot more than I expected, which is great. But I just wish he could have went with Indy on his adventure. It would have been cool to have more screen time with them. But again, I'm thankful for the screen time we did get with them. To see the three of them united at the end of the movie, it really hit me in the childhood feels. It was great to see our trio from Raiders of the Lost Ark together one more time. So I'll give it a slight pass. Now, here is one of the main things. Here's another main point about Dial of Destiny that I just had a gripe with. And that is the characters of Helena Shaw and Teddy Kummer. So Helena is a main character in this. She's on the poster. She's Indy's granddaughter. And in the 25-minute segment of the flashback scene of Indy being undercover, trying to get an artifact back from the Nazis, he was working with her father, who was played by Toby Jones. His name was Baz, and he was a great character. I really loved him, and I tried very hard to like Helena, but she was, in my opinion, very annoying throughout a good portion of the movie, because the way she was written, right, it's like she has to remind the audience every 10 seconds how cool she is, instead of actually letting us see how cool she is. Take Marion, for example. In Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and in Raiders, she showed how cool she was. She never had to, tell Indy, oh, look at me, I'm so smart, gorgeous, reliable, I can handle myself. Your characters should be able to show that. If you have to look at the audience and spoon feed them how good this character is, then you haven't written her well enough. There's literally a scene in this movie during the cart chase sequence where Indy's trying to chat with her, and he's talking about, how did you get yourself in this mess? Selling your soul for bail money. And then she's like, what? I'm smart, I'm efficient, I'm beautiful. Naming off all these things, she's looking at the audience, telling us all these cool things about her. And I just, sat there in annoyment. This character is extremely full of herself. And she's like that throughout most of the film. She treats Indy like crap throughout most of the picture. And I'm just sitting here wait a minute. We're supposed to like this lady? She has been a very narcissistic person throughout this whole film. She's very negative, toxic, narcissistic, and I'm supposed to like her? I didn't care for her at all. like, she's constantly bashing Indy, like, she doesn't need his help, I can do everything on my own. It's just the most negative writing for a female character I've ever seen. Like, she was just not a good person. Like, she literally helps frame Indy for murder, and she lies to him, uses him to get what she wants, and, like, she leaves him behind for the bad guys to potentially kill, mind you. And yet again, I'm just sitting here like, wait a minute. So we're supposed to like this person because you're showing everything I need to not like this character. And I didn't like her at all. Even towards the end, I'm just like, this girl has done so many bad things for Indy, where I'm just like, she was like past the point of no return for me. She was just so irritating. Like, I never thought it was possible. Like, at least with Willie in Temple of Doom, like, she tried helping Indy, right? Like, she complained and moaned to Indy many times. So at the very least, she tried helping out, and she helped him many times throughout the whole film. Like, she was a good person. Like, she helped Indy in Short Round save all the kids at the end of the movie, you know. Like, she was a genuine good person. She screamed a lot, which was annoying. She complained a lot, but she was still a good person. Now, look at Helena. She's not a good person. She uses people to get what she wants, and I just can't like her. And going to Teddy now. Teddy, for me, was just kind of like, okay, we're going to get a Short Round-ish character, right? But we're going to take away all the good things that made Short Round a good character. Like, Teddy, yet again, was another annoying character for me throughout the whole movie because he's just a thief. The only character trait he has is that he likes planes, and he's a thief. Like, he complains to Helena all the time about how Indy's not going to let them have the artifacts so they could sell it off for money. He complains a lot, doesn't really do anything helpful until the very end of the movie. He was just very annoying. Like, there's literally a scene, right, where he steals Indy's watch that was Indy's dad's, by the way, and Indy tells them to give it back to him. Like, this kid has not one caring bone in his body. And again, I'm just thinking, like, so, like, what? We're supposed to like this person? Going back to Short Round for a second, like, yes, he was a thief, but it was just a trait of his character. It wasn't his whole, thing. Like, he was a caring, good kid who had Indy's back the entire movie. He was a good companion. And he saves Indy's life multiple times throughout Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. He was a great side character. I didn't used to like him, but now, I mean, last few years of watching the film, I've been liking him a lot more. I don't know. Like, there was a time where, child lead characters were annoying to me, but now I'm just kind of, okay, Short Round's not that bad. Let's give him some credit. Now, Teddy, on the other hand, his whole character is built around the fact that he's a thief. There's nothing else positive about him. He's just an arrogant child the entire film, and all he does is complain. They took Short Round, but they took away all the important elements that made him a good character. Then they just left him with that, oh, he's a thief. And the only time he helps in the movie is when he flies the plane to get Indy and Helena back to the present after going back in time. But overall, the characters of Helena and Teddy, I just didn't like very much. I just wish they could have been written better in a way to actually have me care about them, because they were both just written in a very toxic, negative way. It's very hard for me to like them as characters. And the next thing that I want to talk about is the whole time travel. So, there were theories going around. I'm pretty sure these theories are backed up from the plot leak sources that were released before the movie came out, that it was going to feature time travel. And I had mixed feelings about it, but I mean, Indiana Jones has always been about, the spiritual presence of the artifact that Indy is going after. Like, I even liked the Crystal Skull. I really did. The alien aspect, I was okay with it. I mean, mean, come on, is it really that far-fetched compared to, the Grail healing up wounds like it's peroxide, glowing rocks, or ghosts flying out of the Ark? And the time travel thing I thought was a pretty interesting idea. I was just kind of worried, okay, this could work, but are they going to be able to do it right? Because time travel is a very, overused thing at this point. I mean, it's like, how many movies have we had that featured time travel? I mean, the Back to the Future trilogy will always be the best movies ever made featuring time travel. Nothing's going to top that. So many films have featured that story element, but that trilogy did it the best, and it's never going to be topped. But I liked the time travel idea of how the dial allows you to go back. It allows you to pinpoint a certain period in time that you can go back to using mathematics. I thought that was a very cool idea. I was really disappointed though. So the original idea, I'll say it like this. So it seemed throughout the movie that it was showing that the villains in this movie is a small group of Nazis led by the main villain, and he's trying to get the dial back because we see him again when he's younger working for the Nazis during the flashback 25-minute sequence, which I'll get to later. His name is Voller, and his whole idea is he wants to get the dial so he can go back in time to the day in 1939 when the Nazis invade Poland, because he wants to go back in time and use the knowledge that he now possesses to update the V2 rocket and use it to win World War II and completely change history, because he wanted the Nazis to win. And I was really hoping that we were going to get, a time travel sequence of Indy and them going back to 1939. I thought that would have been very cool. But instead, they get sent back in time to this battle going on in Rome back in like the 13th century or something. And I mean, the movie was hinting at that throughout the entire film. Like, there's like pictures and like little puppet plays that we see that were hinting on the fact that they were going to go back to Rome during the Battle of Syracuse. That's what it was. And now, I had mixed feelings about the whole time traveling back to the Battle of Syracuse. It seemed a little out of place to me. I like it a lot more. I've seen the movie about 3 times now, and I'm okay with it. It wasn't what I was hoping for, but at the same time, it was pretty cool. Like, the scene of Indy getting to meet Archimedes, I thought was very cool. Like, this man has been studying this history his entire life. This is like a big moment. For me, it's like me if I got to witness the Titanic sinking and I got to meet Thomas Andrews. Like, I would have had the same reaction. Like, Indy being able to go back in time and see a point in history that he's been studying his entire life, it was a big moment. Like, I liked it. It was a very emotional moment. Like, it was very cool. Like, when he said the line, my God, we're witnessing history. It's just, that really hit me in the feels. As a fellow someone who likes to study history, like, if I ever got to witness, an event I've read about so many times, I'd be pretty emotional myself, So I understand 100% where he was coming from. But again, I mean, I love the whole idea. I just wish we could have went back to 1939. I think that would have been a much more better plot point, but that's just my opinion. And the other thing, while we're talking about this, so towards the end of the film, when they're in the past, Indy decides that he wants to stay in the 13th century and work with Archimedes, because at this point, Indy truly believes that he has nothing left in the present. Mary and him have separated, and Mutt's death has completely destroyed him. Like, he has no hope left. And he wants to stay in the past, as he feels like that's where he belongs. And Helena's sitting there trying to convince him to go back with her. Like, this is the moment that... This was the only time I genuinely liked Helena. Because, finally, for once, 2 hours and 30 minutes in, she finally decides to start showing some compassion and that she actually cares about Indy. It's like, way to go, Helena. You're actually a human being and not a narcissistic scumbag. But anyway, she's trying to convince Indy to go back to the present, and he won't do it. It kind of reminded me of the scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where Indy's dangling over the cliff trying to grab the Grail cup, and Indy's dad is trying to hold on to him, but his hand's slipping, and his dad's telling him, I need your other hand, I can't hold on. And he's like, I can reach it, I can almost reach it, Dad. And then he's like, Indiana, let it go, And he convinces Indy to grab his hand, and he can pull him back up. Now, they should have did something like that with this scene, but Indy kept saying he wanted to stay in the past. So instead of Helena, using her words to convince him, she just socks him in the face, right? And then it just cuts to Indy back in his apartment laying in bed. I'm like, are you kidding me? Why couldn't it have been something like, Helena says a very heartfelt message to him, and then the camera just pans to Indy sitting there thinking. We don't get an outright answer, but then it cuts to black and we're thinking, oh no, did he stay in the past? And it's like, oh, he decided to go back to the present, That could have been a nice little, reminiscent of that talk between Indy and his dad in Last Crusade. But of course, we didn't get that. Helena just knocks him out. Okay, everything's good now. And I was just like, really? Helena just knocks him out and brings him back to the present? That was the best you could do? Like, come on. Like, that was just very disappointing. But again, just another small little thing that I wish that had went a different direction. So, those were about all the points. And the last little small thing that really bugged me is that I wish we could have gotten a scene in this movie of Indy being scared of snakes. Every movie had like that one scene that reminded us, oh yeah, Indy is terrified of snakes. And we really didn't get that in this movie, other than the sequence where Indy and Helena and some of the boat crew members are getting ready to scuba dive underwater to a shipwreck. The captain points out that there are eels in the water, and then Teddy's like, they look like snakes, and Andy's like, no, they don't. And like, that was the closest thing we got. I'm like, couldn't we have gotten like one scene with like, I don't know, what if like one of the crew members had a pet snake and Indy gets scared? I mean, it just seems like a small thing to me, but we really should have gotten a scene with Indy being terrified of snakes. Just to keep that tradition going, But again, just another small little thing I wish that could have been added. But I mean, it's nothing vital by any means. Now we're going to get into the 12 things that I listed that I did love about this movie. So I've mentioned it many times, but my number one most favorite thing about this movie was the first 25 minutes. So the first 25 minutes is a flashback scene to 1944 with Indy undercover, as a Nazi, trying to get back this dagger that apparently pierced Christ's skin at the crucifixion. And Indy and Baz Shaw are trying to get it back. And it just felt like classic Indiana Jones of Indy being captured by the Nazis, and he gets free, and he goes after the train in a Nazi car, and he fights off some more Nazis, and then he jumps on the train, punches more Nazis. It's just classic Indiana Jones, beating up Nazis. Classic, right? And the thing that really blew me away was the de-aging technology. So this movie, in my opinion, features the best de-aging tech that we have seen thus far. Like, the de-aging was so uncanny to me. Like, they really did an amazing job. Like, it looked flawless. There were only, like, small little parts where it looked a little off. But, I mean, overall, the de-aging tech looked flawless. It looked great. Like, it really... the whole 25-minute flashback sequence, it really felt like... What if they had done a fourth Indiana Jones movie back in, like, 1992 or something? Like, that's what it felt like. And that whole train sequence of Indy fighting to get that dial, him fighting that Nazi officer on the train and dodging the train tunnels and everything, it was just classic Indy. I loved it. And I loved the soundtrack. It was like John Williams did like a greatest hits. Like the whole 25-minute sequence featured all kinds of classic tracks from the original trilogy. So the whole 25 minutes just felt like an action-packed little mini Indiana Jones episode. It was very cool. It brought you right back. Like, this is what I wanted to see. It was a masterful way to open up the movie. Like, James Mangold could not have opened the movie up in any better. I just wish we could have gotten a scene of Indy getting into a gunfight with some Nazis. But overall, the 25-minute sequence is flawless. It was beautiful. And the next thing I really enjoyed was that I think some people were kind of annoyed that they brought back Nazis as the villain again for the third time, but I was okay with it, you know? Like, the Nazis are the best villain. I mean, we get the best villains when they're Nazis, you know? The Nazis are the classic Indiana Jones threat. So I was kind of thinking, like, you know, why change things now? They work. So I was okay with it. And the other thing that I liked about this movie, number 3, was the underwater sequence. It was something that hadn't really been explored yet in the Indiana Jones franchise. I thought it was really cool that, you know, we got to see a sequence of Indy doing underwater expedition, going to that shipwreck and getting that golden box and bringing it back to the surface and having to dodge the eels and all that. It was a cool little sequence. It was something different, something we haven't really seen before. So I really enjoyed it. It was something very different. And number 4, the clues and the props. Like the dial itself is it's now like one of my favorite movie props. It kind of looks like a giant clock a little bit with the 2 arrows. And I love the whole idea of it, you know, of it showing you how to go back in time using mathematics. It was so cool. And like the other props in this movie, like that dagger, that piece of gold that Indy finds that helps him find Archimedes' tomb. Like, it was so cool. Like, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is where Indy realizes that this artifact that he's holding is way too heavy. It was made of wax, and he dumps alcohol over it and lights it on fire, and then the wax melts, revealing this piece of gold with writing engraved in it. Like, that was classic, like, you know, Indiana Jones finding clues. It was a nice little aspect that we kind of lost a little bit in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So I was very happy they brought that back. But the artifact props, yet again, I just gotta say, they were just so beautiful and detailed and masterfully made. Very cool props. And the exploring sequences, like, another favorite part of this movie was Indy and Helena exploring that tomb, trying to find Archimedes' tomb or his coffin to find the other piece of the dial. That whole sequence was so cool. Like, before the movie came out, we had 2 little scenes released to help us get hyped for the movie. The first one was a section from the cart chase, which I'll get to here in a minute. And the second one was Helena and Indy being trapped in this room, and Indy has to figure out the riddle to opening up a passageway, and he figures it out that he needs to dump all these pieces of the temple into this little river to help raise the water, and it helps open up a passageway. It just seemed like classic Indy. Like, that scene alone really show me that, you know, Indy was going to be holding his own in this movie and that Helena wasn't going to be overshadowing him the entire film. Like, he solves a good amount of the puzzles, like, on his own throughout most of the movie. So I'm glad they didn't make him a side character in his own franchise. And the scene where we see him back in the costume when he goes to Tangier to the casino for that illegal auction of stolen antiquities, that whole sequence was so cool. When he walked out of the elevator wearing the classic costume, I was like, our boy's back. Indy is back, baby. one last ride, and it was so awesome. And I love the scene where he crashes the auction and tries to get the dial back, and he starts using his whip, and all the mobsters, they all pull their guns on him. It was a nice little reminiscence of the scene of Indy shooting the big guy with the sword in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was a nice little, it was a reverse. It's like, Indy's now the point of view of how that guy felt, like, welcome to the 20th century. But the casino sequence was beautiful. The hotel design and everything, it felt like something out of the Uncharted video games, and that's a good thing. And now we're going to talk to this cart chase sequence that I've mentioned a couple of times throughout the recording. The whole cart chase sequence was so much fun, and it kind of reminded me of the minecart sequence from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And my favorite scene in this was when Indy had to jump out of his cart to Helena's before it got hit by another vehicle. Like, that was a nice little stunt there done by a real stunt man. And another scene that I really enjoyed, little side note here, was the horse sequence where Indy's trying to escape the bad guys trying to capture him by riding his horse through the parade in New York City. Because for those of you who don't know, the day that the attack happens, there was a parade going on in New York celebrating the return of the Apollo 11 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins. And as a space NASA fan, that was a cool little thing. Like, I love it when Indy's riding through the parade, he sees the three of them on their float, and they all just look at him. Like, I thought that was pretty funny. It's kind of little, real history tied in to Indiana Jones movie. That was a nice little sequence. And going back to the cart chase, that whole thing, along with the horse sequence, was a lot of fun, and it felt like, like an Indiana Jones, like, greatest hits kind of thing. Because, we gotta get Indy riding on a horse. Like, we didn't get to see that in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And, he rode a horse in Raiders and Last Crusade. So it was cool that we got to see that brought back again. I thought it was pretty cool of him riding the horse through the train tunnel. And the train's right behind him. And he has to quickly go to the next lane before it hits him. That was just a nice little thing. But yeah, both those action chase sequences, like, were a ton of fun, and I love the amount of work that went into them. Like, they felt very real to me. Very, very real. And the late 60s theme, again, was a nice little thing. Like, one of my favorite things about the movies was the different time periods. Like, my favorite was Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That 50s feel was so cool to me. They really recaptured it with the way they designed the streets, the cars, the outfits everybody was wearing, the music. You really felt like you were back in 1957. And it's the same now with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Like, the amount of detail they put into to make it feel like you're in 1969 it paid off. Like, it was really cool. And I like how after the 25-minute sequence, it jumps forward to 1969 with Indy asleep in his apartment, and his neighbor starts blaring loud music. And Indy, opens up his window, yelling at them to turn the music down. Like, you just feel like, you can just feel that Indy does not fit in with this time frame, like, at all. Like, his golden days are long gone. And now he's in a time frame where he's kind of been forgotten about, where he doesn't fit in. So, the minute that scene starts, you really get that feeling. And I think it really did add to the story that he's a man, like, out of time. Wink, wink. And this film does a really good job of respecting the previous movies. One of my favorite scenes, a good example of this, is during the scene when Helena and Indy are climbing up this wall to get to the upper levels of the area they're exploring. Indy was talking about how, like, I can't believe that I'm still doing this. I'm double your age, Helena. Like, I hurt everywhere. I have screws in one shoulder. My shoulders are crapped out. And, he's like, you don't get it, like, I've went through a ton of bad stuff. Like, you weren't forced to drink the blood of Kali or be tortured with voodoo or be shot 9 times. So I thought it was pretty cool to get some Temple of Doom references in there as well. And we did get a couple of tiny little references. Like, we get a picture of Mutt's military photo on a shelf in Indy's apartment. And we also, if you pay attention, when the camera's panning to the living room, you can see that Indy has a picture on a wall that was in his dad's house in Last Crusade. It's the picture of, I believe it's the one of the night, walking across the invisible bridge, the leap of faith, which was the final challenge. That picture was in Indy's dad's living room, and that picture is now in Indy's apartment. You can kind of miss it. You have to kind of like pause it to see it. But again, nice little, reference to Last Crusade. Maybe been a little thing, but I'm glad they did that. Nice little reference there. And the ending shot of this movie really hit me in the feels that it's really over. The final shot we see is the screen going to black, and the last thing you see is Indy's hat hanging outside his apartment. And the last shot, you see Indy's hand come out the window and grab the hat, and then the credits start rolling. And that ending scene of Indy and Marion, getting back together and reconciling and deciding to, work out the pain and suffering that they're going through with the death of their son, and just them embracing one another at the end of the movie with Marion's theme playing. Marion Ravenwood's theme, I think, is composer John Williams' best work. That theme is so iconic, and to hear that one more time, it hit me. It really, really did. And that final shot of Indy grabbing his hat it hit me, the story's over, and I'm pleased with the ending. It was emotional, it really was. When the classic theme started playing, the credits started rolling, I was very pleased with the outcome, and just, well, it's sad, to see a story wrap up, but you're also happy at the same time that it happened, But at some point, everything comes to an end. A story can only go for so long. And we got 5 beautiful Indiana Jones movies that will be around forever. And I got to witness 2 of them in theaters, so I'm forever grateful, that I got to experience that. But that pretty much wraps it up with everything that I was wanting to talk about. But Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny really surprised me. I was very pleased with the outcome of this movie. I'm very happy I got to see it. And if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend that you go check this movie out. And it was a good ending to one of the greatest male lead characters in the history of Hollywood. Indiana Jones will always be my #1 favorite movie character, and I'll be dressing up in the costume till the day I die. I love these movies, and I'm forever grateful for the amazing memories these films have gave me throughout my life. So I hope that everybody listening really enjoyed this recording. I'm still trying to get the mojo back, if you will. I'm kind of relearning how to do this, and I want to get better as I go along. And I think I'm getting back to where I was. I might need a little bit more work, but overall, we're getting back on track. The show, like I said, it's back in full swing. I'm going to be doing 1 episode a week. And one last thing I wanted to say before we wrap this up, I just wanted to mention that I have decided that there is a new goal that I want to reach during the next few, maybe 2 or 3 months. I was wanting to set a goal to see if we could reach 1,000 plays. So according to my data on Spotify Anchor, we are, as of right now, 695 plays. And I would like to see if we can reach 1,000 plays within the next 2, 3, 4 months, something like that. I want to see if we can hit 1,000 plays. Because the way I look at it, I think it's very important to set goals to reach towards. Because I think it's a good thing. Setting goals, like a light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. I think setting a goal is very important. So I think be a good idea to see if we can set a little goal and see if we can get to 1,000 plays within the next few months. Let's see if we can pull it off. And so that's my little challenge right there. So, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And thank you so much for listening to this recording. I have been dying to talk about this movie. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. So until next time, my name is DJ Apollo, and you are listening to the Tales of Music and Film.